Hello and welcome back to another Parry This History video. Today we are continuing our Kingdom Come Deliverance II history series with a biography about Lacek of Kravaře, the richest lord in Moravia and an important character from KCD2. So before we get into it, bear in mind that he is a real historical figure and the events of the game are based on real life history. So anything I say in this video may in fact be a story spoiler for the game. So consider yourself warned. But with all that out of the way, let's dive on in and learn all about Lacek of Kravaře. Lacek of Kravaře, also known as Lacek of Helfstein, was one of the foremost Moravian noblemen of the late 14th and early 15th centuries. His life spanned a transformative period in the Czech lands, marked by the waning years of the Luxembourg dynasty's hegemony, the onset of the Moravian Margraviate Wars, and the early stirrings of what would become the Hussite Revolution. Lacek rose from initial financial difficulties to become arguably the richest man in Moravia, amassing an immense network of estates and exercising broad influence in political, military, and religious spheres. His activities, particularly from the 1380s into the 1410s, shaped the political landscape of Moravia and Bohemia, and his support of reformist ideologies foreshadowed the Hussite upheaval that would follow his death. Born around 1348 into the prominent House of Kravaře, Lacek was the youngest son of Derslav of Kravaře and Eliška of Sternbeck. His father, once a courtier in the service of Emperor Charles IV, died in 1365, leaving a complex family inheritance. Lacek's older brothers, Vok, Benis, and Derslav, initially outshone him in influence. Following the death of his uncle Jošt of Kravaře, however, Lacek inherited Helfstein Castle and its associated lands. This inheritance proved decisive, providing him with a secure economic and strategic foundation upon which to build a formidable dominion. His marriage around 1370 to Markéta or Margaret, the daughter of the Polish lord Jarek of Pogorzela and niece of Bishop Preklev of Warklaw, forged vital Polish connections. Together, Lacek and Markéta had three children, sons Jan and Derslav, and a daughter Eliška. Sadly, both sons would die before their father, shaping the latter part of Lacek's life and leaving him with no direct male heirs. In the 1370s, Lacek engaged in disputes with the Sternbeck family and navigated the complex feudal politics of Moravia. By this time, he was already reconstructing Helfstein Castle into a grand residence. Perched strategically above the Moravian Gate, Helfstein's monumental architecture signified Lacek's growing wealth and ambition. He also granted privileges to towns like Lipnik nad Bekvau, improving their economic standing, and acquired properties in the Hostin Hills. During the early 1380s, Lacek's fortunes rose precipitously. The deaths of several close relatives, among them his brothers, allowed him to consolidate holdings across Moravia. He came into possession or administration of significant estates such as Fulnek, Bilovec, Radek nad Moravici, portions of Prerov and Ranis, and further territories through guardianship of his nephew's properties. By managing the inheritance of his deceased brother Vok's children, Lacek administered Stary Jisen, Novi Jisen, Stramberg, Zetten, and even bishops' fiefs around Roznav pod Radhostem and Mystic. This guardianship increased his regional clout, and by the end of the 14th century, Lacek's name appears frequently in legal, diplomatic, and court documents, attesting to his status at both the Moravian Margrave's court and the royal court in Prague. The late 14th century in Moravia was dominated by the protracted conflict known as the Moravian Margraviate Wars, which pitted the Luxembourg princes, Margrave Prokop and Margrave Jošt of Moravia, against each other. Initially, Lacek supported Prokop. He even seized Hluboky Castle during these conflicts, an acquisition that he retained afterward. Yet his political instincts were finely tuned, and when it became clear that Margrave Jošt would emerge dominant, Lacek shifted his allegiance. By the time the wars subsided, Lacek was a loyal partisan of Margrave Jošt of Moravia, earning his trust and favor. His loyalty to the Luxembourgs extended beyond Moravia. In 1383, together with his brother Vok, Lacek acquired Radek nad Moravici in pledge, further broadening his portfolio of lands. Additionally, in 1385, he participated in a military campaign to Hungary, supporting Sigismund of Luxembourg's bid for the Hungarian crown, thereby strengthening familial and dynastic bonds within the Luxembourg sphere. By the close of the 14th century, Lacek's influence was immense. He had emerged from relative obscurity and initial financial hardship to become a heavyweight in Moravian politics. Appreciated by the ruling Luxembourg family for his loyalty and wealth, in 1389 he demonstrated not only political clout, but also piety and charitable spirit by founding an Augustinian monastery in Fulnek, followed by another in Prostějov in 1391. The turning of the century saw Lacek's domains reach staggering proportion. Between 1398 and 1407, a series of inheritances, purchases, pledge, and advantageous settlements expanded his territorial holdings to an unrivaled scale. Besides the core properties, he acquired western Moravian estates including Náměst nad Oslavou, Velké Meziříčí, and the Odry estate. He also acquired Hostin Castle and Sierce in 1404. A legal dispute in 1406 to 1407 involving property that rightfully belonged to his relative Peter of Kravaře and Strasness briefly tarnished his name, but he ultimately complied with the court ruling, returning the seized property. By about 1407, Lacek's possessions encompassed at least 16 castles, 2 keeps, 3 fortresses, 11 towns, and 7 townships, and approximately 180 villages. This made him the single richest nobleman in Moravia at that time. Such unprecedented wealth granted him the ability to influence provincial affairs at will, and ingratiated him even further at the royal court. In 1407, partly at the behest of Margrave Jošt of Moravia, Lacek relocated to Prague, where he was appointed High Chamberlain of the Czech Kingdom in March. By year's end, he rose to the powerful position of High Burgrave of Prague, placing him at the center of Bohemian royal politics. His counsel was sought in royal decisions, and he regularly participated in the Czech provincial court session. Lacek's prominence at the Prague court coincided with the career of Master Jan Hus, the reformist preacher whose teachings stirred both fervent support and fierce opposition. In Prague, Lacek came under Hus's influence and began to embrace church reform ideas. This association marked a critical turn in Lacek's life, binding his name to the early reform movement that preceded the Hussite Revolution. In these years, Lacek also proved instrumental in broader international conflicts. In 1410, sympathetic to Poland and opposed to the Teutonic Order, he negotiated amnesty for Moravian raiding groups, among them figures like Jan Žižka and Jan Sokol of Lamberg, allowing them to join the Polish cause. This diplomatic maneuver both removed troublesome elements from the Czech lands and boosted his reputation at the Polish court. Margrave Jobst's death in 1411 precipitated changes in Moravian governance. King Wenceslaus IV claimed the title of Margrave, but lacked the desire to govern personally, entrusting Lacek with the role of Moravian Land Hejtman or governor. Lacek thus resigned his position as High Burgrave in Prague and returned to Moravia. From this vantage point, he became the king's principal lieutenant in the province, wielding significant administrative and judicial authority. As Land Hetman, Lacek furthered his support of Hus and the reformist clergy. He invited reform-minded priests into his expansive domains, ensuring that the sermons and teachings of Hus spread widely. When Jan Hus was imprisoned in Constance in 1414, Lacek marshaled his political capital to protest the preacher's detention. He actively participated in drafting letters of protest to the Council of Constance, including the famous Letter of 1415, signed by hundreds of Bohemian and Moravian nobles. This letter condemned Hus's execution and the curtailment of preaching freedoms. Lacek's name would forever be linked to the early Hussite cause, and contemporary anti-Hussite pamphlets signaled him out as a promoter of Wycliffian and Hussite teaching. In tandem with his political and religious undertakings, Lacek was a capable military leader, having already proven himself in previous campaigns. He again took parts in conflicts supporting the Polish crown against the Teutonic Knights. In 1414, he personally led a contingent of Moravian troops, including spearmen and archers, in the renewed Polish-Teutonic struggle. His position and connections made him a crucial figure in bridging Czech-Polish diplomacy and military cooperation. Domestically, in February of 1412, Lacek signed a provincial peace treaty in Brno, alongside King Wenceslaus IV and other Moravian nobles. nobles, seeking stability in the face of various internal disputes. In 1412, he hosted Polish King Władysław II Jagiellon in Nowy Jisan, cementing friendly relations with the Polish court. Lacek's illustrious hospitality, extensive domains, and strategic command of castles like Helfstein showcased his importance as a pan-regional figure. Although deeply involved in the protest movements against Hus's mistreatment and execution, Lacek did not live to see the full-fledged Hussite revolution that began in 1419. In 1416, he attended a session of the Olomouc court, but died in December of that year. He was interred in the monastery church of the Augustinians in Fulnik, a religious house he had founded and supported. At the time of his death, Lacek left no direct male heirs, having outlived both his sons. His only surviving child, Eliška, married Albert of Sternbeck in Lukov. His vast array of estates, including the formidable Helfstein castle, passed to his relative Peter of Kravaře and Strasness. Peter, like Lacek, would later be closely associated with the Hussite cause, ensuring that Lacek's religious and political sympathies did not vanish with him. Lacek of Kravaře's wealth was unparalleled in Moravia. He owned or controlled at least 16 castles, over a dozen towns, hundreds of villages and fortifications, and estates like Fulnik, Bilovec, Stary Jisan, Nowy Jisan, Stramberg, Setin, Odry, Radek nad Moravici, Namest nad Oslavou, Velký Meziříčí, Hostin, Trice, and many others fell under his lordship at various points. His primary seat of Helfstein Castle remains one of the largest and most historically significant castles in the Czech Republic, symbolizing the might and ambition of its medieval owner. Politically, Lacek served two rulers, Margrave Jošt of Moravia and King Wenceslaus IV, earning high offices and significant trust. He played a decisive role in stabilizing Moravia following the Margraviate Wars, shaped Bohemian court politics as High Burgrave, and influenced Central European diplomacy. As a staunch supporter of church reform and Hus's teachings, he was among the earliest noble advocates for what would become known as the Hussite cause. His leadership in drafting and signing protest letters to the Council of Constance was a bold statement against ecclesiastical injustices that would resonate powerfully after his death. In sum, Lacek of Kravaře's life offers a vivid portrait of a nobleman who deftly navigated the treacherous politics of late medieval Bohemia and Moravia, acquired formidable wealth and landholdings, and played a key role in the religious controversies that foreshadowed the Hussite era. His legacy persisted through the estates he left behind and in the lasting memory of his efforts on behalf of Master Jan Hus, making Lacek of Kravaře a pivotal figure in the dynamic history of the Czech lands at the turn of the 15th century.